Hello and welcome to Lecture 2 of the Research Methods and Ethics in Science course. The topic is Introduction to Research Methods. And my name is Dr. Elifianu. You are welcome once again. We would first look at the essence of research, and as an example, we would look at how research, for instance, has changed the way we communicate with regards to the use of mobile phones. So this slide tries to show how the mobile phone has evolved over time. And in this instance, we are looking at from the year 1980 to 2015. So as you can clearly see, the mobile phone started as quite a huge device, looking much more analog than digital from the beginning, and it has evolved through time, and we can now boast of the new smartphones that we have now. So the essence of this slide tries to tell us that without research, we would not have been able to move from the mobile phone that we had in 1980 as compared to what we have now. So research essentially has played a huge part in this development. It means that with the research, we're able to make the phone much more efficient, faster, and even having a nicer look than it used to be. So we'll move on to the next slide. In research, we engage in facts findings. The term research consists of two words, that is re and search. Re means again and again, and search means to find out something. The following is the process. So it starts as somebody wanting to investigate a phenomena by observing and continuous observation, and tries to collect data, analyze the data, and draws conclusions. In essence, research means that there has already been a search. There is information already available about phenomena, but we try to do another search, or we keep researching depending on the research problem we have. We need to look at what people have done previously, which is documented and accepted, and which has followed laid down procedures, and then we try to dig deeper and to come up with new findings. People define research in different ways. For instance, Burns 1997 defines research as a systematic investigation to find answers to a problem. Grinnell 1993 defines research as a structured inquiry that utilizes acceptable scientific methodology to solve problems and creates new knowledge that is generally applicable. Redman and Maury 1923 define research as a systemized effort to gain new knowledge. According to C.F. Rummel, research is an endeavor to discover, develop, and verify knowledge. It is an intellectual process that has developed over hundreds of years, ever changing in purpose and form, and always searching for truth. We can clearly see that research must follow a structured process, or a well-defined process, which should be acceptable. And it is evident from all the various definitions that research must be done in a particular way and an acceptable way. That is the reason why we have to study the course research methods to understand and then to appreciate all the various accepted methods that we need to use to conduct research. The main aim of research is to find out the truth which is hidden and has not yet been discovered. Research objectives may be broadly grouped as follows. 1. To accurately portray the characteristics of the situation, that is, descriptive research studies. 2. To evaluate the underlying cause of a phenomenon or occurrence, that is, diagnostic research studies. And 3. To examine the hypothesis of a causal relationship between two variables, that is, hypothesis testing research studies. An example of a descriptive research study would be if one wants to conduct a research on the campus life of mining engineering students, or to find out the nature of the undulating landscape of Takwa. In this case, the researcher would observe these phenomena and try to describe them as he or she observes by using certain laid down procedures. It is descriptive because the researcher will state or describe his or her observations in the research report. In the case of a diagnostic research study, the researcher may observe a phenomenon or identify a phenomenon and try to find out the underlying cause of the occurrence or phenomenon. For instance, a researcher may notice or observe that the illiterate or semi-illiterate population in Ghana do not follow the COVID-19 safety protocols and would want to find out the reasons why or what causes this phenomenon. That would be a diagnostic research study. In the case of a hypothesis testing research study, the researcher will propose a hypothesis. For instance, the eating habits of a student has a significant effect on his or her academic performance. The researcher would now try to find out whether there is a significant relationship between these two variables, that is, eating habits and academic performance. And the researcher must be able to measure these using appropriate scales or any other means of measuring these variables. Descriptive research, therefore, does not involve thorough analysis of the research problem, but simply describes what the researcher observes. We can then refer to diagnostic research and hypothesis testing research studies as analytical because they involve the analysis of collected data. Applied versus fundamental research. Applied or action research. Applied research aims at finding a solution to an immediate problem facing a society or an industrial or business organization. Thus, the central aim of applied research is to discover a solution for some pressing practical problem. Alternatively, fundamental research is mainly concerned with generalizations and with the formulation of a theory. Basic research is directed towards finding information that has a broad base of applications and thus adds to the already existing organized body of scientific knowledge. So while fundamental research aims at adding to the already existing organized body of scientific knowledge, applied or action research is specific to a problem. For instance, if you are the CEO of, let's say, Vodafone Ghana, and you have noticed that there is a lot of customer churn, that means you are losing a lot of customers and it's affecting the business operations, you may be interested in finding the root cause of this sudden phenomenon, which is not helping the organization or making the organization lose a lot of revenue due to the customer churn. So you will most likely want to do some research to find out the root cause of these losses and then find a solution to this problem. So you would most likely do some action research to reverse this negative phenomenon. Quantitative versus qualitative research. Quantitative research is based on the measurement of quantity or amount. It is applicable to phenomena that can be expressed in terms of quantity. Alternatively, qualitative research is concerned with qualitative phenomena. That is, phenomena relating to or involving quality or kind. For instance, when we are interested in investigating the reasons for human behavior, that is why people think or do certain things, we quite often talk of motivation research, an important type of qualitative research. So in essence, quantitative research deals with the measurement of variables, or we look at variables that we can actually measure. For instance, age, gender, income level, etc. So in this case, we can easily measure somebody's age. We can find an income bracket for somebody. So it means that we can measure these variables. So in quantitative research, we normally look at variables, or let's say relationships between variables that can be measured, and using statistical tools to find out the relationships between these variables. Whilst in qualitative research, we look at phenomena that will involve certain characteristics or certain attributes that are qualitative, and we would normally spend time doing probably interviews, etc., to find out more about these phenomena. Conceptual versus empirical research. Conceptual research is that related to some abstract idea or ideas or theory. It is generally used by philosophers and thinkers to develop new concepts or to reinterpret existing ones. However, empirical research relies on experience or observation alone, often without due regard for system and theory. It is data-based research, coming up with conclusions which are capable of being verified by observation or experiment. We can also call it as experimental type of research. Such research is thus characterized by the experimenter's control over the variables under study and his deliberate manipulation of one of them to study its effects. Conceptual research is thus guided by existing theory and therefore involves looking at phenomena being explained by existing theory. And in conducting such research, the findings may support or may not support the existing theory, which would then call for rethinking. Research involving theoretical frameworks will fall under conceptual research because such research is guided by theories and models that are already existing. With regard to empirical research, if we want to, for instance, find out if listening to lively music while working may promote productivity, we can then conduct a survey, for instance, on a set of audience who are exposed to lively music and another set who are not listening to music at all, and then we can observe the subjects. The results from such a research will give empirical evidence if it does promote creativity or not. So in empirical research, we are interested in having hard evidence that we can always defend, and then we can draw conclusions from that hard evidence. Some other types of research. All other types of research are variations of one or more of the above or previously stated approaches, based on either the purpose of the research or the time required to accomplish research, on the environment in which research is done, or on the basis of some other similar factor. We can talk of laboratory research or simulation research, depending on the environment in which it is to be carried out. And we can also talk of historical research, which utilizes historical sources like documents, remains, etc., to study events or ideas of the past, including the philosophy of persons and groups at any remote point of time. For instance, if there is an assertion that people of the Ga tribe come from Israel, which I've heard several people propose or postulate, then one can try to do a historical research to find out whether that assertion is true or not. Archaeological research or the examination of archaeological artifacts will also fall under historical research because it has to deal with things that have happened in prehistoric times, etc., and people try to prove, for instance, the existence of giants and dinosaurs, etc. Research methods versus research methodology. Research methods may be understood as all those methods or techniques that are used for the conduct of research. Research methods or techniques thus refer to the methods the researchers use in performing research operations. In other words, all those methods which are used by the researcher during the course of studying his research problem are termed as research methods. Research methodology is a way to systematically solve the research problem. It may be understood as a science of studying how research is done scientifically. In it, we study the various steps that are generally adopted by a researcher in studying his research problem, along with the logic behind them. Researchers not only need to know how to develop certain indices or tests, how to calculate the mean, the mode, the median, or the standard deviation or chi-square, how to apply particular research techniques, but they also need to know which of these methods or techniques are relevant and which are not. And what would this mean and indicate and why? So in trying to understand the difference between research methods and research methodology, one may look at research methods as the various types of techniques or methods that a researcher will wish to use to solve a research problem. So there are various alternatives that can be used, and each alternative is a research method. But research methodology is much broader, and it involves the step-by-step procedures that the researcher would have to use to solve the research problem. And it is much broader and much more detailed because it states out the technical as well as procedural aspects of solving the research problem or conducting the research. Note, research methodology has many dimensions, and research methods do constitute a part of the research methodology. The scope of research methodology is wider than that of research methods. Thus, when we talk of research methodology, we not only talk of the research methods, but also consider the logic behind the methods we use in the context of our research study and explain why we are using a particular method or technique and why we are not using others, so that research results are capable of being evaluated either by the researcher himself or by others. Ethics is also a very critical aspect of research which we need to look at, and the next slides will discuss research ethics. Research, however novel its discoveries, is only of any value if it is carried out honestly. It implies that honesty is critical in research ethics. It is a simple matter to follow the clear guidelines in citation that will prevent you from being accused of passing off other people's work as your own, and this is called plagiarism. So apart from honesty, plagiarism is also a critical aspect of research, and it means that students must understand what plagiarism is and the implications thereof. As much as possible, students must avoid plagiarism, okay, which it means that you are actually lifting somebody's work and claiming that it is yours. And in using other people's work, there are ways and means of going about it to avoid plagiarism. Thirdly, working with human participants in your research always raises ethical issues about how you treat them. So it is important that when you are engaging people in your research, which mostly pertains to social sciences, you must be trained on how to treat the human subjects that are involved in your research work. There are two aspects of ethical issues in research. One, the individual values of the researcher relating to honesty and frankness and personal integrity. And two, the researcher's treatment of other people involved in the research relating to informed consent, confidentiality, anonymity, and courtesy. So with the second aspect, we have to look at issues of consent, confidentiality, anonymity, and courtesy. Honesty in your work. Honesty is essential not only to enable straightforward, above-board communication, but to engender a level of trust and credibility in the outcomes of the research. This applies, to all researchers, no matter what subject they are investigating. Intellectual ownership and plagiarism. The worst offense against honesty in this respect is called plagiarism. That is directly copying someone else's work into your report, thesis, etc., and letting it be assumed that it is your own. Using the thoughts, ideas, and works of others without acknowledging their source, even if you paraphrase it into your own words, is unethical. Equally serious is claiming sole authorship of work which is in fact the result of collaboration. So in essence, there are instances where you collaborate with others during your research study, and it is critical that in your research report you must indicate that there is collaboration, and you must also state all the co-authors involved in the research study. Acknowledgement and citation. Obviously, in no field of research can you rely entirely on your own ideas, concepts, and theories. You can avoid accusations of plagiarism by acknowledging the sources of these features and their originators within your own text. This is called a citation. And an example of a citation is stated, and it states that this is a collaborative work that is done by 3 authors, as shown in the citation. And in the previous lectures, we would look at the various types of citation styles and how to make sure that you use each style appropriately. Responsibility and accountability of the researcher. Apart from correct attribution, honesty is essential in the substance of what you write. You do have responsibilities to fellow researchers, respondents, the public, and the academic community. Accurate descriptions are required of what you have done, how you have done it, the information you obtained, the techniques you used, the analysis you carried out, and the results of experiments. A myriad of details concerning every part of your work. So in essence, as directed by most thesis templates, and I'm sure you might have you might be privy to the thesis template of your institution. It is important that you give out as much information about the research as possible, so that anybody who picks your research report can understand all the procedures that you used and can actually test whether the right procedures have been used and the reasons for using those procedures as well. So in essence, the researcher must provide enough information about the research project so that for purposes of reproduction or replication, anybody who wants to do a follow-up work or wants to do a critique of the work can conveniently do so. Data interpretations. Distorting your data or results knowingly is a serious lapse of honesty. Scientific objectivity should be maintained as much as possible. If you can see any reason for a possibility of bias in any aspect of the research, it should be acknowledged and explained. If the study involves personal judgments and assessments, the basis for these should be given. Silently rejecting or ignoring evidence which happens to be contrary to one's beliefs, or being too selective in the data used and in presenting the results of the analysis constitutes a breach of integrity. It is very critical that students should not engage in the manipulation of data they collect. There are instances where students would adjust figures of data they've collected so that their figures may look good and support their theoretical models, etc. And this is a serious breach of research ethics, and students must not engage in this. Any ethical researcher would not and should not engage in the manipulation of data, which also affects the interpretation of the data. So if the data is manipulated, it means that interpretations do not actually hold. The diagram shown tries to describe the research process, and it can serve as an overview. So step 1 involves formulating a research problem and involves formulation of the problem itself and an extensive literature review. And a review is critical because it serves as a guide in the formulation of the research problem. Step 2, conceptualizing a research design. Involves the research design and then selecting a study design. Step 3, construction of instruments for data collection. And it's critical to select an appropriate data collection method. These steps will be treated in the topics that would follow this one. Step 4, writing a research proposal, and we'll look at how to write a research proposal. Step 5, processing and displaying of data. So we'll look at processing data, displaying data, data analysis in general, and then step 6 will be writing a research report. So in summary, in this lecture, we have discussed the meaning of research, definitions of research, objectives of research, types of research, research methods and methodology, and then research ethics. Thanks for watching.